We're gathered at the table as we have on many occasions been here before. And perhaps sometimes we do wonder, why do we do what we do? Why do we come yet again to the table? Obviously, Good Friday, the death of Jesus, is more uppermost in our minds than perhaps at other times. And where that this evening, it's one of those times when quite a number of younger people come to our communion gathering, and maybe that's there. Why do we do what we do? Going to get another image in front of you now. Some of you guys, well, maybe women as well, fly a lot. I fly a lot more frequently than I have to do, but we've all been in that situation. We've all been in aeroplanes, and we've all listened to one little section that always happens on an airplane, and that is when the flight attendant is up and the flight attendant gives their little introduction. And I would imagine that not many people, not many of you, actually bother to pay attention to that girl at the front. It's normally a girl. And why is it that you don't pay attention? I suppose there's a number of reasons. The first reason might be that the girl or guy may look bored themselves. They don't have much exciting information to impart. All that they're going to be saying is that you put this life vest on and you pull the tug here, and then when you really struggle and those little oxygen things fall down, you're supposed to tug down. And if you've done that 6 times every day you go to work, it's hard to get excited about it. So the person naturally does look pretty bored. Another reason for you not listening well is that probably also you have heard it all before. You know exactly what that person's going to say. You know that the inflation device underneath your seat or that, whatever it is, that cushion, your cushion, can act as a flotation device if you need it in the middle of the water. So you know what she's going to say. You know also that your nearest available exit may be behind you. You've heard all of that. And the person is not going to say anything out of the ordinary. They're not going to say, actually, in seat 36E, that's a special seat, because under your seat, you are the only one who has a parachute. And as well as a parachute, you've also got a little rocket. And when everyone else is going down, you're going to be going safe. That's not going to happen. So sometimes it's just because the person themselves who's given the talk can be boring. It's also because you're probably not interested because you've heard it all before. Or another thing is that you probably think it doesn't really matter because you expect to go up in the plane and come down. And you've done it so often. And you've heard that no matter what happens on occasions with airplanes, it's probably the safest way to travel. So it doesn't really matter. You just get on. If you're looking at anything that's contained in the seat in front of you, it's probably just looking at the little magazine and what you can get in case you forgot to buy a gift for somebody. And that's all that you're probably interested in. So you think the person's boring, you've heard it before, and it doesn't really matter. And sometimes we can make connections with that to church, what we do here. Why people don't really care about the whole gospel message is, again, I think probably because many a person up at the front can look bored, and if they look bored, why would I be interested in what that person has got to say, particularly with Presbyterians and their lack of joy and excitement? I have enough trouble of my own. Why would I be bothered with them? And it's also, again, because we've heard that story and that message so often, and we just say, so what? And it doesn't really matter. And yet, Jesus has told us to keep on meeting together, to keep on doing this I always forget at this point whether it actually says anything at the other side of this table, but it probably says, do this in remembrance of me, getting a few nods. So Jesus has told us to do that. We do this to remind ourselves that actually this is uniquely important. If I was to read a couple of verses from the book of Hebrews, and at Hebrews chapter 2, where we have this warning to pay attention. See, flight attendant, this is important. I want you to listen to this. We must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. For since the message spoken through the angels was binding, and every violation and disobedience received its just punishment, how shall we escape if we ignore so great a salvation? This salvation, which was first announced by the Lord, was confirmed to us by those who heard him. We have heard this. This is vital. You need to listen to this. How will you escape if you ignore what this gospel is really about? This is so important, and you've got to remind yourselves of this in case what? It says there in verse 1, so that you don't drift. You don't drift away. And then I'm thinking to myself, how do we drift? What causes us to drift from the gospel? What causes you to drift if you were a boating sort? You've got your boat and you settle out onto a stretch of water. You're possibly going to drift because it's pretty rough and it's very choppy out there, and through no fault of your own, you're fighting against the elements, you're fighting against the wind that's blowing, and because of that happening, you end up being further away from where you want it to be. And again, we can think, even in terms of ourselves and our spiritual walk and how we walk with Jesus, sometimes it's because some of us have gone through difficult times, and there have been difficult points, and we've had to walk through that, and you can say that's the reason that I've drifted a wee bit, that I'm not just so fully focused on Jesus as I was, because I've come through a lot. And sometimes maybe on a nice day on a boat, I was going to say parked somewhere, but I'm sure there's some better term for this. Berth, is that I don't know. But as you're there, you see somewhere nicer, somewhere where you'd rather be, somewhere further up. And maybe it's a nicer spot because it's closer, maybe to where you're going to eat or where you can grab a drink or something. And that's where you'd rather be. There's something more pleasant up the road. And again, when it comes even to our appreciation of the gospel and the church and all that Jesus has done for us, sometimes we actually drift because actually we just get discontent where we are, and we look at somebody else and what they're going through or what they're part of, and actually we say, well, that's better than what I have. And then we end up going and chasing after that and realizing it's not any better, and then we end up drifting again. But probably the easiest way to end up drifting is just through doing nothing. Get into your boat, stretch out, you lie down, and just let the current take you wherever. And that can be us spiritually, because we're just not doing too much about it. We don't really think too much about it. And suddenly we haven't been reading our Bibles. We haven't been reflecting what Jesus Christ has done for us. We haven't been praying. We haven't been nurturing that relationship. And we've drifted. And yet, go back to what this couple of little verses in Hebrews was saying, that we must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. That is why we do this continually. That's why we remind ourselves that this is really, really important. This is of first importance. That we want to remind ourselves that Jesus has died for us and that he paid the price. And if anything, the book of Hebrews, the entire book of Hebrews, what it does is it lifts up Jesus for us, that Jesus is unique among everyone and every created thing because Jesus is supreme. That's the entire message of the Bible. And we're altogether not like that. And all that we are not, Jesus, of course, is. And yes, I don't deserve it, what Jesus has done for me, because I fail, and I've tripped up, and you have done the same. And sometimes we might wonder to ourselves, why would Jesus do that for me? And that's why we come to this table. And we remind ourselves, even if I can't figure out why he did it for me, I know that he did. And he paid the price for my sin. And that's what we do just now as we gather around this table. And it wasn't simply for the person beside you that Jesus died. It was for you. And he paid the price fully, completely, exhaustively. This wonderful, full, deep, great salvation. And that's what we keep in our heads just now. And as we come to the table, we remind ourselves of the invitation that Jesus has given to us. Come to this table, you who have much faith, you who would like to have more, you who have been to this sacrament often, and you who have not been for a long time. You who have tried to follow Jesus, and you who have failed. Come. It is Christ who invites us to meet him here. Let's pray. Tonight, we remember Jesus. The one, though he was rich, yet he became poor, and he dwelt among us. He was mighty in all of his actions, healing the sick and the troubled. He was a teacher to his disciples, but he was their companion and servant. May we be grateful for Jesus, for what he has done for us. So we remember Jesus, who prayed for the forgiveness of those who rejected him and for the perfecting of those who have received him. We remember Jesus, who loved all people and prayed for them, even if they denied him and rejected him. May we be grateful for this Jesus Christ. So we remember Jesus, who humbled himself, was obedient to death unto the cross, because God has exalted him, and he has redeemed us. May we be grateful for Jesus. Amen.